What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of the Monday Resultsdb PGA show. This week, going to be going over the PGA Championship that was the Phil Mickelson defeats Father Time event, something I don't think anybody expected to happen, but we'll definitely dive into that. And then we're definitely going to go through the contests and find out what people did, how they got to the top, some exposures, player pools, the normal that we do here and everything like that. But first, let me bring in my guy, Mr. TJ Laessig at TJL5124. What's happening, TJ? How you doing, my man?
Doing great. Phil Mickelson. Wow. I mean, just so cool. I honestly didn't think Phil would ever win a tournament again, let alone a major. And to not only win, but to be pretty much in full control of it from the start, 4 just solid rounds, going toe to toe with none other than Brooks Koepka, the major slayer himself in the final group. And it was a really, really cool moment to see. And congrats to Phil. Like, I think golf fans all around the world love to see Phil win. He's just the best.
Oh, super scene on 18 again. You know, basically the Tiger Woods reinvented from the Masters when he took it down, the whole crowd behind him. Just crazy events that you can't imagine, you know, in wildest dreams. You know, I had Phil winning a lot more tournaments only on the Champions Tour, not on the PGA Tour. So, you know, we'll see about what happens from here, but you can't ask for a better way. If that's his last PGA Tour victory, a major like that, taking it down, setting the record, the oldest person to ever win a major on tour. Like, this is just incredible stuff. And that's why we love sports so much. That's why we love golf so much. Ties into everything that we do. Every sport has its own story. This was certainly one for the ages. Going into it here, guys, you know what we're doing on this show? We're going through Resultsdb. We're going to look at, did people have Phil Mickelson in their lineups to take down these GPPs? I know his ownership was extremely low across the industry. If you haven't joined us before, it's pretty simple. Rotogrinders.com. You're heading over here to PGA tab. You're going to drop down to Resultsdb. All you're doing is simply changing the date to the golf tournament start time, which was the 20th. It does show golf, classic slate. You go under contests, and all of your contests will be listed here. And if you have joined us in the past, we appreciate the support. But we're going to do this one a little bit different. I want to bring some of the higher end stakes into things here. The 44-44 was pretty interesting. I had an entry in it last week. Some other guys that we'll talk about had an entry in it close to home. And man, what an awesome event to be a part of. This is $1 million up top. It was a little better than in the past. I know that's still 33% of the prize pool, but the TOC entry certainly held some value. And then on top of that, you still had like 200, 100, like there was decent payouts thereafter that would be life-changing for most, if not all. So we'll start there. And it's because I want to tie a few things in. First off, shout out to the winner, Club Cam Cole. I saw them lots of places across the GPP scene this week, including 4th place here. Definitely some other guys we're going to give props to, but we'll look at the winning lineup first here, TJ. And just for those of you that don't know, so it was back there on the previous page, but the buy-in for this, or you could have won in through plenty of satellites that you could have played in for $75 or, you know, even less in some cases, up to more money, of course, but 658 entries came in under, I believe it was 750 was what it was pegged for. So there was quite a few entries that you know, didn't get filled up. So that was a nice starting point to give yourself a chance to cash at least, and then go for the upside from there. But here's the winning lineup, TJ. We've got no Phil Mickelson in sight. You and I looked before the show. 2 people in the entire tournament rostered Phil Mickelson, and I understand why. It's a lot of money to put on Phil Mickelson with $4,444, again, being the buy-in. But Brooks Koepka, Willie Z, Scotty Scheffler, Louis Oosthuizen, Gary Woodland, and Harris English rounds it out. I like a few things here. What do you see? Talk to me about the winning lineup here.
Yeah, very contrarian lineup, obviously, given that only one person over 10%, 2 people around 2%. I mean, going to Koepka, having the guts to do that, obviously the major slayer, as we know, but has had some injury issues, concerns over the past couple of weeks. I mean, I was surprised to see Koepka perform the way that he was able to after just a couple short weeks ago, being able to barely lean down to pick up his ball. But hey, when Koepka turns it on, he can turn it on. I'm sure he is going to be in a lot of pain after playing the way he did for the weekend, but pretty, you know, strong move going there at only 2% ownership. Zalatoris, Scheffler, and Louis actually were 3 of my favorite plays for the week. Just guys that are playing solid golf. Thought Louis was a great play at that price point. And then 2 of the low-owned value plays in Woodland and English, guys that weren't particularly on my personal radar, this week, but getting them at those low ownerships, I think it's a nice solid build overall, and then leaving the $500 on the table to, again, ensure that they're differentiated and that they have leverage against the field.
Yeah, I like that. Last thing you said, there was a big one, leaving $500 on the table on top of already being this contrarian. But we've talked about this in the past, and it's not hard to look in majors and say, okay, they picked great players, but I think they picked upside, right? When you think about it, it was definitely risky for some of these plays. But if you look at Koepka, Zalatoris, Scheffler, Usti, Woodland, all these guys have upside. English even, these guys can all be in the top 10 of a tournament, if not take it down. All have wins besides Louis. He can't win on PGA or on American soil, if you will, but lots of wins in his career. Second place career Grand Slam in majors. One of my favorite plays of the entire week. He'll be a recurring theme, of course, based on how he finished. I just thought at 8,000, people just always want to overlook Louis. I don't think he's ever withdrew from a major. So that's normally the concern with Louis. Is he going to withdraw? Well, in a major, I don't think so. And then also they forget guys like him, Hatton, Berger, and I know some of these guys didn't come through, but I'm just going to name them, but they only really play in great fields. You don't see them a lot of other times, right? Guys like Willie Z, Scheffler are young. They're out grinding, but a lot of these other guys and doing well while doing it. But I'm saying that they don't have to play in these other guys like Louis and Berger and all them. They don't have to play in every tournament. They just don't need to. So remembering that when you're coming in with their price point associated with it, that they only play in strong fields, it makes it tougher for them to finish higher up the board, but they certainly are likely to come through, make the cut, and then they do have upside thereafter. We're going to look at a couple other things here. Again, shout out to Club Camcall. That's a huge risk they took. I like that they skipped the 10K, 11K, and the 6K range. Went with a 4-time major winner over the last 4 years or whatever it's been. And so I think, again, the lineup is great. A lot to be said there. I want to talk about something else here, though, TJ, because I think one thing here, I know everyone's sitting back watching this might be saying, maybe, I'm not ever going to be in a 44-44. A lot of this could be irrelevant. But if you look across, and I've got it here, here's the $200 single entry. And you and I talked in depth on this last week. You can go back and watch the show if you want the strategy piece and talk about some of the ways we would approach something like this $200 single entry. And you'll notice 437 is the winning score, 447 here. So anything we're talking about here, you can bring across. And that's my segue. I want to go to that next. We'll come back to some of these other guys. Definitely want to give some other shout outs, but I want to go to our main man, Cal Spears, Grinders Cal, been doing his thing always in every DFS street. He, takes the information right from the site and goes and puts it into play. So he had 3 entries into the tournament. This one finished 5th for 70,000. I'll get your thoughts here first, TJ, but here's the win. Here's the lineup for 5th place for Cal: Jordan Spieth, Finau, Fitzpatrick, Louis O, Answer, Grillo. And before you give out the secret, you know where I'm going with this next. Just talk to it from the same way you talk to Club Camcole's lineup. You know what, the lineup construction, the ownership, the money spent, all these thoughts on these players. And then I'm going to go to the next step of why I think this is important to remember.
First off, great lineup. I mean, six super, super strong plays, not having to go too crazy off the board, but still getting enough ownership leverage at the same time, right? Kind of follows one of the typical layouts that we see from an ownership perspective. 30% on Answer, 21 on Jordan Spieth. So you've got the 2 guys at 20% plus. You've got Finau at 16%, and then 2, basically right around 10% and 1 under the 10%. So I think that lays out nicely from an ownership standpoint, from a construction, starting it in the 10K range up at Spieth. Obviously a fantastic play this week and every week for the past couple of tournaments, just continues to play solid golf. Skipping over the 9K range, peppering in a couple of those 8K guys, and then staying out of the 6K range as well. So I think really, really strong lineup overall, and just 6 really solid golfers. And I love this build by Cal.
Yeah, I agree. I think the build is super sound. You mentioned one of the big ones was just skipping over that 9K range. I think that was huge with Hovland and X being very popular in there, still being able to get in some of the guys that made sense and were a little bit underpriced to our minds, in guys like Answer and Jordan Spieth at the prices they were at. Spieth going for the career Grand Slam at the PGA Championship. Obviously, I always like in a sport where it's very hard to get right. Hence, Phil Mickelson winning this tournament, one of the longest majors ever in the history, regardless of how it played. That's pretty crazy in itself. 4 full rounds, but just goes to show anything can happen. I like when we have a little bit of motivation or something like that. So I love the call with Spieth, and he didn't even have his best week. He could have done so much more. Fitzpatrick made mistakes down the stretch. Still had a pretty good Sunday, but going in the water at the end there definitely hurt Cal. I know that one was tough, but he was right in the mix, and it will translate when we get over to this $200 single entry, because 417.5 would get you around, almost 10x your money. You may be close to $2,000 here, give or take. And so it just goes to show, if you are just building one. And the reason I bring that up is because look at some of these plays. So Spieth, Finau, Fitzpatrick, Louis, Ancer, Grillo. I'm going to go here for a second. Our main man, Notorious. Let's go back to his content last week. And you guys can go right on rotogrinders.com, go to PGA, go to home, and it'll still be there from last week. Here's Noto's core plays. Here's JVZ, my guy cards. This is his GPP breakdown. I'm just going to go through a couple things here. Scroll through it quick to show you how you can utilize our content week to week. And it certainly ties in with building something like a higher end single entry, or even your $200 one. If you say, Tambo, I'll never be in that 44-44. I don't want to play satellites, whatever it might be. Spieth in Cal's lineup, skipped over the 9K range. Louis in Cal's lineup, both myself and Notorious had him tagged as conviction plays and went off on how much you have to put this guy into your lineups this week. Finau in Cal's lineup. There's 3. Matt Fitzpatrick. There's number 4. Skip these guys at the bottom. Ancer for a top 5 bet. That makes sense if you kind of land on him at the end. And then you go over to Cards' GPP breakdown and his guy, Emiliano Grillo, and he posted on Twitter about this play as well last week. Cards, if you're not following him there, go follow him. All of us, he posted there that this was, crazy how he leaned out at such a great play in his stat model. So the first 4 plays were in Noto's article or tagged by myself and Noto on a guy like Louis. Grillo was on Cards' Twitter in his article, full write-up, and tagged as a conviction play on the model. And then Ancer just fell into place. You and I had talked about him last week. Again, remember that what TJ's doing, he's only allowed to go to the $7,500 range. He was certainly in on Louis. He was certainly in on Ancer, had mentioned and talked about these guys as well. So pretty much the entire golf content team is putting out information and content that you can plug into a lineup that you can be willing to put your money on the line and be able to have it pay off. So again, shout out to Cal. Love to see that. Any extra thoughts there, TJ, on that sort of thing?
I think it's a great example of how, not everyone has hours and hours and hours to be pouring into their research. Obviously, Cal, super busy guy, but at Rotogrinders here, across all of the different articles, shows, etc., that we have, ways to pick out different pieces. And, it's not just about picking out the plays. It's about having enough context to then, know how to choose the page and pick the plays and put them into the right lineup, right? So he didn't just take all of the chalky plays that any of us are recommending, but make sure that you're mixing and matching and getting in some of those lower owned ones, some of those more GPP oriented plays. So yeah, I think it's a great use case for how we can leverage the tools that we have here at Rotogrinders.
Yeah. And of course, like you said, you have to know, and that's what we're trying to do with this show to bring it all together. I never just hop on this show and say, look, we had all the nut plays. Here's what you do. You put them together and win. I'm not going to be that guy. I get how it works, but Cal obviously has been in the industry for a very long time, has enough sense to say, okay, I've got to make some decisions here. If he had went with Daniel Berger and then dropped down somewhere else, that's not here. If he had went with Hovland or X in the above range, so he could have easily went Finau up to X for 1,000 and dropped Fitzpatrick down to 7,400 and picked another guy down here. And it wouldn't have worked out the same. It just wouldn't have because X missed the cut. So it's just an example of recognizing some of the things TJ and I talk about here on weekly is about things like ranges, skipping the 9K range to get yourself unique that way. And then just because you fall in the 8K range doesn't mean you need to go to Berger, right? I personally did. I love Berger last week and grinded his way to get back, had an okay Saturday, and then bombed it all away on Sunday as well. So just one of those things, but shout out to Cal again. Some other guys here, Sammy Knoll. We've talked about him plenty in the past on the show. You can follow him on Twitter. Matt Smith, great dude, been around the industry a long time, absolute crusher, one of the better tournament players in the world, in my opinion. Mentioned it himself on Twitter last night, and it's good for him. He's doing it, man. He said it was his 5th second place in Millie Makers. So that's pretty crazy, pretty impressive to see. I think down the stretch, he needed something. I forget what he had mentioned, whether it was Finau, Rahm, or whatever. He was just off there. He had unique plays there, though. But what are your thoughts here on this line? We'll give him a shout out here as well, TJ. John Rahm, Finau, Louis, Ancer, Casey, and Hoffman to round it out. All 50,000 spent.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really solid build and really goes through the methodology that we typically talk about, right? You have starting with Rahm and Answer, two guys that are very strong plays for their price point, guys that we knew would likely come in relatively high owned in that 20% plus range. And then you've got Finau and Casey in the mid range from an ownership and pricing standpoint, and then getting, not crazy off the board, but making sure that you have a little bit of differentiation with Louis and with Charlie Hoffman. So I think it's the perfect example of a lineup where none of these plays are crazy off the board. It's all people that we feel solid about, all people that were good plays for their price point, but finding that right combination of leverage and, eating the chalk where there's someone like Answer that is just a strong play. And hey, I don't care if they're 30, 35% owned. I'm still going to play them. I don't care if Rahm's 20% owned, still number 2 golfer in the world, going to play him. And yeah, I think it's a really nice build. And, starting with the 10K, 2 8Ks, 3 7Ks, 7,300 as the lowest price point. That seems to be a trend that we've seen a lot in winning lineups lately, especially in stronger fields, keeping kind of raising the floor in terms of the pricing of your lineup, and just gives you a really solid 6 golfers overall.
Yeah. And I love that last point you made. I think that one we could really tie in here is that sometimes finding the gem or the diamond in the rough that you think you found won't always propel you to the top. Casey could drop down $1,000 to Phil Mickelson here at 0.006 or whatever percent owned. You pop up Finau to $9,600 X. And while you got the good with Phil Mickelson, you've got the bad with Xander. So it's like, yeah, that lineup would probably look better, but we found, especially in these higher buy-in tournaments and anything, even in the $200 single entry, it applies. That's why we're bringing this stuff up, but you can definitely put in these guys and floor out at like 7,300 or 7,500 and have good 6 out of 6 equity as far as making the cut goes. So made cut equity. And then on top of that, still have guys that can perform well and get to the top. Casey came in second at the PGA Championship last year to Morikawa and pretty much did everything in his power. Answer, Rahm, like you said, just underpriced for what we thought they were, with Rahm being $1,000 less than Rory. I thought that was a great call. Finau, even through some things and some struggles, still has come top 5 in majors and top 10s plenty, and has motivation there for sure. And then the Louis play we were all over anyway. Charlie Hoffman's not really that far off the board, and he still had ownership in this. So it just goes to show sort of that textbook, 90 to 100% range, little bit of separation if you are going to have 2 guys that are a little bit higher owned. So definitely want to give another shout out to Matt Smith. Nice work there. Picks up a nice $200,000 as well. I don't think we saw Mickelson at all, right? Even though he was in those lineups, like a couple people, did roster him. He didn't show up. Oh, shout out to Fate Bender too, man. Nolesman, I got to give credit to Nolesman here. 22 entries, of course, that's good for him. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the top 23. Definitely made back his money and then some. So good on them. Human Cespedes. This is Justin Mcmahon. You can follow him as well. He's another great guy on Twitter. We've checked his lineups out on here before. Lots of big names, as would to be expected. So probably enough on that one. I definitely love that we could tie in today, TJ, that the content was all there. Like I said, Cal's lineup still would have been easy to create for most of you out there using our content, and still would have picked up almost 10x your money in a $200 single entry. So we'll move on. I'm going to move over here. If we get to the $5, we get to it, but I want to spend some time on the $20. A lot of what we'll talk about will apply anyway. This is where you'll start seeing the bigger score. Shout out Batches Me in the $5, Forsaken, Jesse on Twitter. Always a fun follow, likes to make fun of some things that are going on, trolls a lot for the fun of it, and like following him. But same name on Twitter, I believe, by the way. But you can go back here. RG member, Batches Me, 481. You need some bigger scores in these ones, TJ, right? There's a bigger field to wade through. You got to get a little bit more unique. Interestingly enough, still no Phil Mickelson. And I get it. I know he wasn't owned. I understand. I'm just saying, here he was 1%. It's not the worst number. There was a possibility with his score, the position placement points mattering more, and all these factors. But 481, congrats to Batches Me. They take it down for a cool 100,000. We'll hop back over here though to the millionaire though, HT Tech guy, and he got 50,000. He or she got 50,000 spent. The lineup was Brooks Koepka, Hideki, Sungjae, Rose, Louis, and Phil does make it in on just 6 entries to pick up not only $1 million for first, but that TOC entry that's going to be coveted for anybody come year end when they get that tournament rolling for another $1 million on the line. But what do you think about this one here, TJ? We've got this Brooks Koepka down to Phil Mickelson lineup here for the win.
Another super contrarian build. I think this is a really interesting one, actually. I mean, skipping over the 11K, the 10K, and the 7K entirely. I doubt that there are too many lineups out there that don't have anyone in the 7K range. So I think that by building in that way, like you're pretty much guaranteed to differentiate yourself right off the bat. Obviously, by playing Phil, you're already differentiating yourselves. But I really like it. I mean, it's like, hey, I'm playing a Phil lineup, and then I'm going. They really went pretty off the board across the way here, but again, all solid guys with history of experience in majors. I mean, even Sungjae has shown recently his ability to compete in majors. You've got the defending Masters champion in Hideki at 5%. You've got Koepka at 4%. Justin Rose 4%. It's really, for this kind of tournament where you're competing against 177,000 people, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love this build. Actually, like you said, when you know the conversation of everybody in the world last week was the 7K range is stacked. Let me just load up and get different in there because not everyone can be owned. I'll use a bunch of different guys in that range to go straight up and just say I'm completely fading that range in some builds. I don't know. He has 6 lineups. We'll look in a second to see, but just goes to show another way to get unique and get off the board without just having to have. Obviously, he does have a diamond in the rough. And Phil, I mean, I could almost call this, TJ, a Masters lineup. You got Brooks Koepka, who, by the way, just came second to Phil Mickelson in a major. Before that, he was second, to Tiger Woods at the Masters. That's pretty crazy to be able to say you've come second to Tiger and Phil in majors. It's not what he wants. He wants to say, where's my 2 more trophies at? And my green jacket, by the way. But either way, he's got 4 majors in his own right. So it's pretty nice there. I think he's going to be competing if he's doing this on what he said was 80 to 85% when asked, sort of how his health was with that knee injury. So there's that. But you could say, second in the Masters, always contends in majors. Masters champion. You mentioned Sungjae competing in majors, second at the Masters in the fall edition or whatever it was there, the spring edition. I can't remember exactly, but the weird edition of the Masters, Sungjae came second in. Justin Rose, Louis, Phil, these guys all perform at the Masters, some champions, etc. So I think, Louis, the career Grand Slam, made a lot of sense from a majors perspective, maybe not just Masters, but because the recent, form of guys like Hideki. So there was that. Skipping 11, 10, and 7 is completely off the board. And then talk about your overall ownership. Like, what do we got here? 10, 25, like under 30% ownership. We're used to seeing like under 70, under 69, 65, something where you're trying to cap out at 70 or less, maybe 75. This was completely unique and off the board. I just want to see here, HT Tech. And we've got them all here. These are the 6 entries, even the anonymous, just so you guys know out there, if you're watching and seeing here, how do you know it's him? It's just the way it works. And right, it just shows their name up to a certain point. But 1 7K guy in KC, no Mickelson, we'll note here. 1 7K guy in Horschel, no Mickelson, no Brooks, no Mickelson. So they were only in that top one together. No Brooks, no Mickelson, no 7K. 2 7K, no Brooks, no Mickelson, and 2 7K, no Brooks, no Mickelson. But just going back, I'll flip it over to you, TJ. But the Mav McNeely, Ricky Fowler, I'm not saying this is why they did bad, and I'm talking to a millionaire here. I'm talking just saying like willing to go off the board. And I want to talk about this quick, and then I'll flip it to you, is because you and I have had this conversation on this very show each week that, look, if you're only going to pile 6 entries at $20 a piece into this tournament, play to win, please. Right? Don't go build that lineup that just has all the same construction and guys that everybody else has. Play to win the tournament, because yes, I get it's $120 and that can be a lot to some out there that's going above and beyond if they usually play 10, $20 a week. I'm not sure what HT Tech guy does. And I'm sure they'll be playing a lot more now that they just won $1 million and had success. But this lineup, Stricker, I just noticed this when I was going through it. Gooch and Adam Long. Stricker again, and some of the others are whatever. You can still play. All these guys were playable, but Stricker's your one play off the board. Stricker, really in on Stricker this week. And by the way, Stricker didn't do bad. 59.5, beat a lot of the guys at the top that missed the cut that you wouldn't have expected. And then, as we talked about here, Phil Mickelson. So full overall thoughts on HT Tech guy, their pool, their winning lineup combined with all those thoughts that I just had there. TJ, what do you think?
I think you said it best when you said, if you're only going to be taking a couple shots at a tournament like this, make sure you're different. Make sure you're not firing in a lineup that's going to be full of chalk. And clearly, I think that's what they did here, right? In every single one of those lineups, there's at least 1 or 2 guys that is not only a little bit contrarian, but under 2% owned. And I think that's the way to approach it. If you're just, you're not playing this tournament to try and min cash. You're not playing it to try and come in the top 1,000. You're playing for that number one spot. That's where all of the money is. And I like that approach here. And I think overall, I think that they did a good job of kind of spreading out their player pool and giving them multiple different chances to hit that winning score. And there you go. Look at it. 501 points and $1 million plus. So congrats to the tech guy.
Yeah, huge week. And I think to clarify just one more thing on that point, TJ, is fully correct. What you said, what I was trying to bring to the forefront is you have to know your tournament, right? And that's what comes down to contest selection with the lineup you're selecting and all of that. Obviously, when we were talking about the 44-44 and ways you could bring it across to something like the $200 single entry, you're still like Cal and his build setup, for example, was still playing to win. He was fading the entire 9K range. He was fading down below. He had enough unique plays in there. Sammy Knoll, when we talked about that they know the tournament that they're in. And so they're applying the information and using the plays to put them in this position, using their skill to put themselves in the position to get lucky. In something like this tournament with 177,000 people, and you're just bombing off $100, 120, call it $100. You're saying, I'm going to throw this $100 at it. That's where I'm saying, finding the diamond in the rough can still be very risky, but I do appreciate that you're going after trying to take down this extremely top heavy prize. Like the difference between first and second is $900,000, right? So I would normally not take a shot at our boy Chopper, Head Chopper, my guy. He felt this before at the US Open at Chambers Bay when Dustin Johnson 3-putt. I can take that shot because I love the guy, and he just won 2 million makers since last season here on Rotogrinders, putting out all his stuff, doing some great shows with him. But I'll just tell you, that can't feel too good. I can only imagine what it's like dropping from $1 million to that. So why not take the shot when you're throwing just $100 at it to go a little bit more off the board and at least taking a stand? I know Phil was only in this one lineup for HT Tech Guy, but they did 3 other lineups. 50% of their builds had Stricker. So they were still taking a stand. I'm not the 50% guy because 6 lineups, obviously if you put them in 3, it's 50%. Yes, you were way over the field, but you played 6 lineups. So I'm not going to say that like in 3 max saying you had 33% of a guy. Yeah, you put him on one lineup. Congrats. I'm saying more so willing to just say, look, if I'm piling in this $120, I'm going after the top. And I definitely like that strategy. I think we see it across most of these tournaments. Let's round it out, though. Let's get to this $5 TJ. Any further thoughts, by all means, throw them in here. But batches me, it was Brooks, Finau, Fitzpatrick, Louis, Lowry, Casey. And I think if we go back here, too, you can see Casey, you can see Fitzpatrick, you can see Finau, you can see Louis. Finau, Fitzpatrick, Louis, Casey, and then Brooks and Lowry, who I really like that combination because Brooks is, again, the major slayer. We talked about it. Lowry won the Open, which was, in wind, tougher course, an actual links style. Some considered this an American links style course, right? Where you would have that option to putt off the greens and the runoffs and all of those waste areas and things like that, where you could kind of tie in some correlation. And then Lowry had been playing some great golf, wasn't getting any ownership in that range where you had Answer, Neiman, who a bunch of other guys. He used Casey right underneath there, so I won't say that, but just there was other ways to go there. And also Brooks Koepka has Lowry's the guy that held off Brooks Koepka, another guy that held off Brooks Koepka in a major on top of now Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson that we mentioned earlier. But Lowry won that Open, and Brooks Koepka said, man, I've played practice rounds with Lowry, and he's one of the best that not enough people talk about all around game. And so, wind, around the green play, scrambling, all of that made sense. So I really like this build here. TJ, what are your thoughts on this winner?
Yeah, and I really like taking those core 4 plays that we saw written up by a bunch of the guys on the RG team and then mixing in the Koepka and Lowry as lower owned plays to go along with that, right? So rather than going with, I don't know, Xander and one of the chalkier 7K plays, right? You need to find your way to get different, as we always talk about. And I think that they did a nice job there by mixing in the 2 of those. Taking a look at the player pool here, can see that they were heavy overweight on Paul Casey, which was one of the favorite plays of the week, and just a lot of leverage when looking at the player pool. So I think a really solid lineup, and also, a nice way to differentiate their 20 entries that they had in this tournament.
Yeah, and back to what we've seen in the past, right? 45%, letting a few run out at 30, getting a few in the 20s, still having pretty much leverage on everyone, taking a stand on a guy like Hovland because it was tough. Like, he was such a good play last week on paper, the price, everything coming in, didn't have the week everybody wanted. I showed on the Wednesday show. For those that you don't follow, check it out every week. Do the Wednesday lineup HQ show. and just showing him. And you and I have seen this every single week on this show, TJ, like this guy is 25% owned, but that's not an automatic fade. Like everyone says, I know there's so many guys around him in the range, but you have to look at how can I build Hovland lineups that make sense. When Corey Connors is $6,900 at the Masters and ends up necessary in the end, by all means too, but just up front, even when you say in your head that he's a great play, you just have to find ways to get different within using them. And that's why you don't have to fade Hovland, but you don't have to go to 40% because look, you're taking some of these other guys that you want to have leverage on that you like better. So this is just a perfect setup across the board. Did use a lot of the common plays that made sense. Daniel Berger, Casey, Answer, Neiman, Finau, all these. And then you start to get a little bit unique with Fleetwood, Scott, Fitzpatrick, Scheffler, and you want to say getting unique with, but these are top players in the world. I know it's a major and they're all here, but it just makes sense from that perspective. And then even going pretty heavy on some conviction plays of their own here in the Lowry, we saw ended up in the winning lineup, 20% over 5. Cantlay, 20% over 5. So taking some shots there. And if you go back here, the only one that they were really out on was Spieth, right? And Spieth was 23% owned, but Hovland, Field, Berger, overweight, Xander, underweight. So basically took the stand there saying, I like Hovland more than Xander. And we knew they would both be chalk. I like Answer and Berger more, which I also did. I like that call. Field-ish on Connors, over on Neiman. Like, I really do like this pool. Any other thoughts on their pool in general, TJ?
No, I think it's solid. I like how they, for the most part, took a stand one way or the other. Again, obviously not a full 150 MME here, but just mixing up their 20. And like we said, yes, it's a major, so there are solid golfers across the board, but really like their player selection and what they did there, mixing it up a bit without, leaning too heavily on a core group of guys, getting that exposure, but having leverage as you do so.
We've got about 5 minutes left here. We're going to get out of here pretty quick. I want to look at one thing. It was actually a pretty rough week for 150 Maxers. You look here, Club Camco, it wasn't a rough week for them. They won the $1 million over in the 44-44 and came fourth place, but they still didn't get all the way there. They just missed out on 3 entries there. So maybe they didn't want to be tracked, but they won $1 million. So they were certainly going to be tracked. Rabble 303 down here at 150, way down the board. So I'm going to hop back here too for 2 reasons. Give my guy Jesse a little bit of love here. Forsaken, talked about him earlier. He was the highest 150 maxer, and again, the only one down to sort of a 20th there, who did pretty good in this tournament. I think it's good. And also we want to look at good players on top of the winners, right? We want to look at everybody, but someone I know who max enters a lot of slates, a lot of sports, one of the better tournament players that I follow as well. I know they're very good. And if you look, this goes back to the same thing that we've been looking at of Fate Bender, Fate Bender, trying to think of some of the other guys, Ski Basher, right? We've looked at some of their pools and seen the contrast in how aggressive versus, can they still make some stands by only going to a max of 25-ish%, call it 30. And Forsaken chooses to go this route, I think quite commonly from my research. So what do you see here, TJ? What are your thoughts on this? This is just back to our common theme, but maybe we can look at it in a couple different ways. Look at the chalk and what they did with the high ownership here. So give me your thoughts on this setup.
Yeah, it's something we've been seeing more and more of recently, where you're not taking any crazy stance, but just getting a little bit of leverage on the plays that you like. And I think when doing so, as we see here, picking a couple of the chalkier options that you're just fully out on, right? So 0% Spieth, 0% Cameron Smith. I think it's probably smart to have some of those guys that you were just Xing off the list if you're going to take that more balanced approach across the board. You can even see underweight pretty much underweight on the 4 highest owned plays of the week, and really underweight on a majority of the top owned plays, and then getting slightly overweight on more of the guys that are in that 12 to 15% ownership wise. So I think it's a good strategy. And like we've talked about in these fields where it's hard to predict or hard to differentiate between golfers. So with a major, right, when everybody of all the best players in the world, you're really splitting hairs when you're choosing between 2 different golfers, as opposed to, like the Bryson at the Rocket Mortgage situation that we always talk about, where there's clear differentiation and clear tiers with the golfer. So I think it makes sense in these types of fields.
Yeah, I can see it now. Exactly. I kind of like this setup quite a lot, because you look at, like you said, these guys are all good plays, but there's also a lot of other good plays down below. And it's almost like, okay, look, I'm going to tier out my underweight stances by the way I like them. So Berger to me was still a great play. And I'm speaking for Forsaken here. By all means, I don't know how they're actually thinking. I kind of think I do from following on Twitter, but it's kind of like, all right, fine. I'll let you tell me Berger is the best play, but I'm still not going with you to the promised land. I'm going to have some. Same with Hovland, but even lighter. Xander, fine. I actually don't even like this, but I'll just put some in. And then Spieth at 10,100 and Cameron Smith at 8,900. We are laughing.gif. Like 0% of those guys. I already saw him post on Twitter today that he couldn't believe Phil Mickelson's price for this week, which is kind of laughable because the price increase obviously won a major, but who knows? He might WD for all we know based off, coming down and celebrating. We'll have to wait and see. It's still early in the week, but then saying like, look, I'll get behind some of these value plays. These guys are priced right, but you nailed it, TJ. You get down to Finau, Zalatoris, Rahm, Harmon, guy Morikawa, even the green. You see the green is showing up there saying, I'm going to be overweight on these guys that for some reason people normally want, but this week they don't. Okay, I'll play them instead. They're still going to be able to get up the board. Webb Simpson, Dustin Johnson, one of the best, number one golfer in the world. Why not give him a try when everyone's going to play somebody else down there? It didn't work out, but it doesn't matter because sort of how it's been spaced out. And then you look at overall player pool, and I think I've done this in the past. I got to just move your face here for a second to try and see, but I think that's 17, 34. Yeah. 50 plus, maybe 55, 60 guys, give or take, but very little of the guys down at the bottom. And you're just trying to hit one of those in with the guys that you're in on at the top. So we'll get out of here, TJ. Any final thoughts on this? Other than that, let the people know where they can find you and what you got coming up this week here at Rotogrinders.
Yeah, not too much else. Just think it was a fun major. Obviously, Phil winning is great for the game of golf overall, and looking forward to the US Open coming up as the next major. But other than that, guys can find me on Twitter, as always, at TJL5124DFS, and we'll have the value plays article coming out your guys' way tomorrow.
Yeah, going to be a week where we want some value. Back to the Charles Schwab. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. Believe this is the Berger. It was, what was it? Berger, Morikawa, and somebody else. I can't remember. We're fighting for it down the stretch there last year. Berger pulled out the win, but it might have been Xander, by the way, was the third guy, but Morikawa definitely missed some short putts down the stretch, only to then go pull off a few weeks later against Justin Thomas in the playoff at the Workday. So this will be a good event. There is some big names in the field. I'm excited for this one. You guys know where to find me on Twitter at ToeTagginTambo. Have a bunch of different content coming out this week here at Rotogrinders. As always, Tuesday, the show with Noto and Cards. Wednesday, the show with, I believe, Cards this week is the special guest hopping on for Lineup HQ. Going to be doing some other things this week here at Rotogrinders. Excited about that. Excited about what's to come. Other than that, thank you and good luck.